Okay, so building is one thing that on a flat screen is good, but it doesn't feel great. That's really at the core of BuildPort Xumia is that question is like, can we build something that couldn't really be experienced on a flat screen and then build a whole, not just a game, but hopefully a whole world around it?
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Save State here on Bono's Gaming. Tonight, I am joined by Wilson Tang, the CEO of, I don't know how to say that, YumeBau?
YumeBau.
YumeBau?
Yeah.
Wilson,
don't worry, it's not just you. Nobody knows how to pronounce it.
Wilson has had a pretty crazy career. That's my understanding anyway. I want to kind of dive into that. But right now you're working on a VR game, a new VR game called BuildPort Xumia. And I got to play a little bit of it, and I'm excited to talk with you about it and to tell you all about it here on the show tonight. And Wilson's going to kind of walk us through all of those things. So, yeah, Wilson, I want to start tonight just by saying thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to your audience for hopefully listening and not getting bored.
That's probably up to you and me if they get bored or not, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times I think game developers, they make these beautiful works of art, and everybody knows the work of art, but not too many people know the person behind the work of art, if that makes sense. Could you just maybe kind of walk us through a little bit of who you are and what your background is? What's your story? Who's Wilson Tang?
Well, thank you for asking. That's a hard question to answer, and I think it's actually taken me decades to figure that out myself. But I think I started off. I was always a bit of a dreamer and a little bit of a world builder inside my head. And like everybody, who grew up, loving movies, and actually it turns out I love the video games as well. More, I'm old enough to remember the arcade games, like the arcades that you see in Stranger Things in the 80s. That's my jam, growing up.
Some
I
Missile
always
Command, Pac-Man, Missile Command, Pac-Man.
Thunder was my game, from Williams, and one of the most punishing arcade games ever. I actually bled on the arcade machine in my neighborhood, and to this day, every time I manage to find the Defender game once in a while when I play it, like everything just comes back. It takes me right back to 14 years old in the arcade, and my fingers start to hurt. But yeah, I was a bit of a world builder and a world dreamer. And then, of course, growing up in Canada, it wasn't a really clear path to how do I, make that into a career. So I ended up getting into architecture school, and I did graduate from architecture school. I worked in Japan and Germany, a little bit in Canada. But then, I think my imagination got the better of me, and with the rise of gaming and computer graphics, I got myself into computer graphics. One thing led to another. This would have been 1995, 96. One thing led to another. I had a chance to work in the anime industry in Tokyo. That was for about 2 years, and worked with folks from Sega. Worked with a really legendary anime director who's the only American, I believe, who's ever directed anime. His name is Michael Arias. So we had a studio there. And then also Mizuguchi-san, Tatsuya Mizuguchi, who's the legendary game designer of like Res Infinite. So we all had a little thing going on in Tokyo. And then just after working on it for a little bit, I got that call that I couldn't resist, which is a call to go into interview for Industrial Light and Magic, which is definitely, a lot of people dream about working at Industrial Light and Magic. I didn't expect to be able to get that call, and flew over for an interview, and one thing led to another, and then that's opened up a whole world of amazing work in film and on project with George Lucas, with Spielberg, with Ang Lee. But then, and I'll dive right back in afterwards about film, but one thing led to another again. And I always said that when computer graphics or when games caught up to computer graphics in terms of visual fidelity, I might move back to games, and I ended up doing that in 2006. So yeah, my career is like architecture, film, and games, and really lucky to work with amazing people at the top of the game in each of those areas.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas, Spielberg, those are some big names.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's also amazing when you get a chance to kind of see them work, and not that I worked with them for a long time, but like they're just really creative people, and they're really in some ways down to earth when they're in small groups, and that's really great to see. I mean, for people who dream about working in the creative fields or video games, and your listeners who are maybe a little bit younger and dreaming about, always kind of always feels like it's so distant, that dream.
Uh-huh.
I think when you get a chance to work with these people, you realize they were just normal people as well, and they end up that what they made just blew up. And
Yeah.
there's this kind of like a aura around them. But when you get to work with them closely, you see through that aura, and they're just normal creative people.
Yeah. Yeah. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us, is what you're saying.
Yeah, one of the first times I saw George before I actually um, kind of actually worked on a project with him, he was standing in line at an In-N-Out Burger at 11 p.m. He was just like, I think that's George. He's like lining up for a burger, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, they put on their pants one leg at a time. They line up for hamburgers.
Yeah, that's cool. Tell us about some of the movies that you worked on.
I only worked on Star Wars Episode One. Oh, sorry. I worked on Episode Two,
Okay.
Attack of the Clones, and I only worked on it for about 8 months. Um, so I was the guy who got the weird projects at Industrial Light and Magic. So I worked on AI, artificial intelligence, which
Uh-huh.
considered a little bit offbeat. It wasn't the Star Wars, or it wasn't main. It wasn't the script wasn't was clearly wasn't a huge blockbuster script. I got to work on the Hulk with Ang Lee, which is he tried to do a little bit something different as well. I
Yeah.
worked on Mini Snicket. Um, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, I in some ways I was lucky to work on these projects that were not expected to be huge blockbusters. I guess the Hulk was kind of, but when it came out, I was they weren't really well received by the audience, I don't think. But over the years, all those films have really kind of found renewed interest,
Yeah.
especially AI, especially the Hulk, even right by
Yeah.
Ang Lee. And that's really gratifying to see that, because when you're working on it, you never really gauge the success of a film by how well it did anyways. You really gauge the success of a film by, I think, how if the director you're working with tried to do something a little bit different that's creatively
Yeah.
challenging, you're proud of that. But of course it'd be great if it's a huge success as well. So
Sure.
neither the Hulk or AI did really well in the box office. So it was really gratifying to hear people rediscover those films.
Yeah, like I missed Hulk when it was in the theater.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then a few years ago, maybe I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I finally had a chance to watch it for the first time, and remember thinking, hey, this is a pretty fun ride. Like
He
I
tried to
enjoyed
do
it.
something a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah,
It's actually very Shakespearean, right? Like it's not a normal MCU movie.
right, yeah,
It's
yeah.
a
That's true.
father, son, and then like the whole that scene on this in the stage when the father turns into absorbing man, full of energy. Like
Uh-huh.
that's felt really almost Shakespearean, and almost like a Greek fable or something. It didn't feel like an MCU movie, but that's the joy of working for true great directors like Ang Lee. Like you always try to push the envelope creatively. And I think when the Hulk came out, I guess Spider Man had been a success, and he wanted to bring his own taste to things and do it a little bit differently. And yeah, it's really amazing to watch a director like that work.
It's crazy that you went from architecture to movies to games. Like that is, those are those don't initially necessarily seem related. Maybe gaming and movies sort of, but architecture not as much. But it also kind of makes sense, right? Because you're building something, especially on the art side of things. You are constructing something. And I would imagine that the architecture background kind of still comes in handy, I would think, from time to time in building these games.
Yeah, I tell you, people, when you're a kid, you go to architecture school and you're like, it's all about making real buildings and concrete and steel and windows and glass and whatever, right? But um, the real key to being a successful architect is to dream up something that doesn't exist, convince others why it should be that way, and then have the patience and the follow through to build that experience in three
Mm.
dimensions. So if you say it that way, it's exactly what it, plus some imagination, but that's what
Yeah,
it takes to make a great game world, is that you start with a vision. Now, granted, the vision for games has to be creative, has to be emotional, has to draw from, other games and other worlds that we've all played and seen. So it's a lot more imagination. But the discipline of like envisioning that, selling it to a team, getting them excited about building it, filling all the details of every nook and cranny, every crack, the right type of foliage, the right type of grass to support that part of the level design, and then to have the patience to uh, go through with a project over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, four
yeah,
years. So absolutely, the training as an architect definitely helped. And actually, if you actually talk to more art directors from games, a lot of them actually have an architecture background or industrial design. Like it's actually quite prevalent in the bigger game studios.
yeah. I actually did an interview with Thomas Van Baal, who made the game Cubism
Oh yeah,
VR, and he has an architecture background as well.
there
And
you go.
that was so interesting.
There you go. I think it's like it's usually like if your parents didn't want you to go into arts, so you do a respectable degree like architecture, but then you secretly find your way back into something that's more fun and imaginative. I think that's how it happens.
Oh, that's funny. At what moment, you're doing all these other things. At what moment did you say, okay, it's time for me to make a game?
Well, I was the moment was another knock on the door, and this time from Electronic Arts,
Okay.
for the Need for Speed franchise. So
Okay.
that was my first foray into video games. And like I said, I think the time was right. That was PS2 or three. I want to say PS. I want to say PS2. But
Maybe
the
three.
graphic was getting pretty good, and I said, well, I always kind of had that. I think um, films is great, but I was never drawn into. Maybe it's ADHD. I don't know, but I'm not one of those people that have a lot of patience about building somebody. But just passively watching a film, I love being pulled
Part of
into
it.
a
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I always had that in me. And when EA came calling and it was Need for Speed, I jumped at that chance, and that was my first foray into games. And Need for Speed definitely, like architecture background, definitely helps. As an architect, you don't just study buildings, but also cities and how cities are laid out. So you're able to kind of create a world that's believable, but obviously it has to be fun as well, right? So that's I think the difference between architecture and game design is architecture is just like I don't want to say boring, but it's more pragmatic and a little bit more functional. I mean, there's sculpture, but you don't mess around with the city streets. Whereas Need for Speed was all about jumps and shortcuts and making driving fun. So you just have to kind of balance the two sides of how to design a whole city, but also keep the
Yeah.
fun, right?
Because you want it to feel somewhat set in the real world, so somewhat realistic, but have that arcadey racer kind of feel as well. So
Yeah, yeah. Need for Speed is a really specific game. Like the
yeah,
fans are aspirational about the type of cars they drive, but they don't want to be taken out of the real world because
but they
it's
also
like
want to do jumps.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not it's not Wipeout, right? I love
Yeah,
Wipeout, but you still have to kind of make sure it's fun and all that stuff. So it's definitely eye opening to be able to balance the two sides.
yeah.
Um, but then yeah, it's from EA, I believe around 2000 and I think by 2010, 11. I already kind of formed a. I left EA and kind of got into mobile games and social games like everybody else with a small startup, and which became Kabam up here in Vancouver. So that was another, in some ways, a kind of another new platform, if you will. People thought I was crazy because all my friends were like, "Okay, let me get this straight. You were making films on the biggest screen with George Lucas, and then you went to smaller screen and did driving games, and now you're making tiny little games for little screens. Like, where's the logic in that?" It's like, well, I got bored, and every like 6 or 7 years, like, what's next? And it turns out mobile games is, even though it's games, it teaches you quite a bit about a lot of other stuff that's important to know as well. Analytics and listening to the player in a really direct way, and also just constantly tweaking the game because it's very much a kind of live thing compared to console games. So it's really eye opening as well. So I learned something new going to mobile games.
At some point, you said VR is where I need to be. How did that
Well,
transition take place? Tell us about that.
I said that because if you roll back to little 15-year-old Wilson, who grew up reading Neuromancer by William Gibson and Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, those science fiction novels. I think I always thought that one day we will be able to experience things in a immersed way, in a world that's full of imagination and fun and interactivity. So I think when we started the new company, the new studio, probably it's been about 7 years now. It was really kind of to ride that wave a little bit. And besides the game that we're going to talk about today, we've been working on interactive exhibits for museums. We have some exciting projects coming out next year for in time with the World Cup as well. So there's a lot of. I think the way I would say, like, I think the idea that we'll be playing on flat screens forever for the next 100 years, obviously that's not going to be true. The question is, how much longer will we play games on the flat screen? Is it, and when will we be fully immersed, or at least, have a lot more experiences, a lot more people playing in VR? I think that's, the question is it 5 years from now? Is it 10 years from now? Is it 15 years from now? So it's going to happen at some point. So I think I always had the dream of building worlds in VR, even from those days of reading science fiction. So when the technology came along for Oculus, I decided to start a game, and this time it's my own studio. It's an indie studio. We've managed to build a lot of. We work with a lot of clients, including Meta, and along the way we keep on building prototypes. And the one that we're really excited about is the one that we're here to talk about, which is BuildPort Xumia. And I want to say one thing. One of the questions I posed myself when we started BuildPort Xumia almost 3 years ago was, what can we do that cannot be done on a flat screen? That's really kind of sucks on a flat screen. Yeah. So we settled on construction with your hands. So yeah, there's construction games and obviously Minecraft and Besieged, but on a flat screen, it's just not as satisfying. But when you try our game, and we spent so much time perfecting it, but just picking up those parts and snapping it in and holding that ship and turning in your hands and pulling pieces off and snapping that in, and that snapping to make it feel good, that took almost a year and a half to get that right.
Good golly.
Right? So
the snapping, I will testify, the snapping does feel really good when those pieces snap together. It's almost like the feeling of the satisfying feeling of two things that are magnetized, that are meant to be magnetically connect. That's what it feels like. And it just feels excellent. It's awesome. Good
Thank
job.
you. We spent a lot of time on that. But we have to get that right. And I said, like, okay, so building is one thing that on a flat screen is good, but it's not, doesn't feel great. And then
Hmm.
second thing is, to shrink down, play with scale, right? So shrink down and fly and pilot that ship that you just built. So that's really at the core of BuildPort Xumia is that question is like, can we build something that couldn't really be experienced on a flat screen, and then build a whole, not just a game, but hopefully a whole world around it. That's where we started. I was a little bit of a Lego fanatic when I was a kid. I'm sure everybody, your fans, your audience, I'm sure a lot of Lego fans out there.
A
And
lot of Lego fans out there.
I'm sure you are. Were you a Lego fan?
I never had a ton of Legos. The Legos I had, I played with. My kids, though, love Legos. I've got so many Lego sets. I've stepped on my fair share of Lego
Oh,
pieces
yeah.
on the room
The
floor. It's the worst thing,
worst torture device ever.
but
But
they love them. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Legos are cool.
I don't know about your kids, but I always dreamed about building little spaceships and vehicles and little robots out of Lego. But then I always
Hmm.
want to shrink down and drive them. So that's
Yeah, yeah,
really where this game kind of came from too, right? It's like, okay, what if I can actually build ships, not just the shape of it, but actually have it meaningful. So it's all physics based, which is kind of crazy. If you put too many thrusters on one side, that ship will fly with a gimp, like it will lean to one
right.
side.
Yeah,
So you kind of have to get your ship pretty well balanced. So that's important. But then being able to shrink down and fly that thing, that was my dream as a kid. So that's really where the game started. But but think about it. So with VR, if you build a ship that's uncontrollable, maybe it
yeah,
does. Maybe you do 16 thrusters on one side, and it just does donuts.
yeah,
You shrink down, you'll throw up instantly,
yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah,
how do you
yeah.
balance that? So there's this. That's another thing we worked on for a year, which is kind of like
Is
think
that
of
where
it as,
the energy system, is that where that came into play?
well,
Where you
that
can
one is
only
for game balancing, but there's a invisible system that's like a autopilot, if you will, but it's
Mhm.
not full autopilot. It's kind of like let's say auto balancing.
Okay.
So you can build any ship, it'll feel different, but the auto balancer will kind of like guide all those thrusters and so that it kind of goes generally where you want to go, but it still feels different depending on how you build it. It definitely prevents it from doing crazy donuts or anything that will make you throw up. So that balance of like true creative freedom, but also coupled with like making it feel good and not throw up
Yeah.
inducing. That's a really delicate balance, right?
It sounds like to me that you have like this game has really made you think like a kid again. Do you think that that's been sort of a consistent thing through your career? Are you always kind of thinking back to when you were a kid and the feelings you had as a kid towards certain things, or is VR like sort of brought you back into that? I don't. Well, the first time I tried VR, it was like just this wow moment. Like it almost was like the a childlike awe, if that makes sense. Do you feel like that's been kind of the case
Absolutely.
with you?
Yeah, and like it's so important. Like, that's kind of why I think like some versions of the metaverse kind of fail because nobody wants to go to work in the VR. There's no imagination, there's no fun. Like, I don't want to go to work in VR. I don't want to do any of that stuff. So definitely, I think fun and imagination has to be part of virtual reality. I think anyway the way we see it, but also every day that our team we have an amazing team assembled for it. Um, our lead TD, who's also my partner in designing the game, his name is Pedro Cardio. I want to make a shout out to Pedro. Um, you know, every time we talk about the game, if it doesn't put a smile on your face and my team's face, then we're not going to build it. And I think that's really important. Like building games takes a long time, like I said, but unlike building a building in the real world, what are we making? We're really making fun. We're making experiences. We're making what you experience when you put on the headset for the first time, which is awe, AWE, right? Awe.
Yeah,
It takes you away from the real world a little bit. It's a little bit of escape. And if games don't do that, then I don't, or games in VR don't do that, I think they really are missing an opportunity, right? So it helps with, the vision of the game, but also just, it's really important to keep the team motivated.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it keeps me motivated because, every day we make games. I mean, you should feel like a little kid at some point.
I think it's really, really good perspective on being behind the development of something like this. I feel like we kind of jumped the gun a little bit. We started talking about mechanics and stuff of the game before we even explained what it is. So could we backtrack just for a second, Wilson, and maybe give us, like, for someone who has never heard of the game before, how would you describe this game to them? How would you explain it to them?
Short version is it's Lego meets Rocket League.
Okay.
So all the creative freedom of Lego, but the fun and excitement and the competitive edge of Rocket League. That's the summary, right?
I
And
think that's pretty good.
and then you kind of think about it, it's like every single game, if you're into space games or driving games or whatever, it's all about, like, here's a ship you can pilot, here's a vehicle you can drive. Except for Zelda, I think Zelda, Windwalker has that. You can build contraptions, but you're not in it. So it sounds really simple, but I don't think there's any other game like this where you can actually build the ship, and eventually in the future, we're gonna have, hopefully, release new modes that's not just spaceships anymore. But you build that thing, and you can shrink down and actually pilot it 1v1 against opponents in competitive modes. And we did release a single player mode as well called Core Siege, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But that's, in essence, is the game pitch. The story is, there's a dimension that's right next to ours, and when you put on the headset, a little scout comes to visit you from the other dimension.
Yeah.
They've been looking for somebody like you for a long, long time because you're a genius at creation, and they don't know how to do it themselves. They're like little lemmings.
Yeah.
So you follow them through this little portal into this world, Xumia, and the little guys are called Zoomies. And the story is that that dimension was actually built by an elder race called the Builders, and everything that you play with, all the technology, all the parts, was created by the Builders, and they themselves, many eons ago, discovered portals into other dimensions, and so they said bye bye to the Zoomies, and the Zoomies were waiting around for somebody to tell them what to do. So thank God you came along, or we came along, the players came along,
Yeah.
and show them the ingenuity of humans. And I think that's really, really important. I think in the story, in the mythology, in the gameplay, we're celebrating human ingenuity, and that's really crucial, and that's really important to us as game developers.
Human ingenuity. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I think we lose sight of that. We have a lot of movies, we have a lot of games to play. As players, we enjoy them, but I think we need to also exercise the creative part of our minds,
Yeah.
especially kids. I think in some ways it was a kind of a reaction against, here, virtual reality taking us away from the real world. That's a bad thing, right? Well, we really want to make a game that's, yes, it's kind of taking you to an imaginative world, but this world's about celebrating what the human mind can create, and have fun as well. And it's not an educational game by any means. It's definitely action packed. It's competitive, but
Sure.
I think there needs to be more games that celebrates what people can create. Minecraft, like, okay, let me back up a little bit. Okay, I spent almost 20 years in the highest level of computer graphics for film and console games, and then this little game called Minecraft appeared on the scene, and it's just 8-bit blocks building little worlds. It's all, and it just, like, it really, really taught the world and taught me a harsh lesson, which is that it doesn't need to be photoreal or high fidelity or hardcore, and can you unleash a little bit of collaboration and creativity? If you can do that, then you can create something that's almost timeless. And that's kind of our ambition for this game. Hopefully, it lasts for many, many years, and we can have a chance to grow the game, bring in other game modes, definitely other parts, expand this universe, and it's designed for that, right? When you go into the game, you land into what we call the BuildPort, which is that lab area,
Yeah.
and you look out and you see different game modes as little floating islands that you can go to. We hope that in the future there'll be more and more islands appearing with different game modes and different people playing them. So we want to expand this little universe, for our players. So yeah, I think it's celebration of human ingenuity. It sounds kind of highfalutin, but I think Minecraft is a really great example of that. That's we really want to aim for that.
Walk me through like the perfect 10-minute session of BuildPort Xumia. You go in, you build, you shrink, you pilot, you blow stuff up. What's Tell me, what's the game loop like? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
You follow the little zoomies through the portal. You arrive. You admire the world a little bit, and you kind of wonder, I'd like to hang out in this world a little bit. And then before you know it, you land up in the BuildPort, and you're taught how to build the most basic ship. You feel you did a pretty good job. You follow the instructions a little bit, just like the first, your first Lego set. You follow the instructions, right?
Yeah.
You go into the first couple of rounds against in the test mode, which is kind of a little bit of a test area, and you're piloting that ship that's pretty well balanced, so that you feel pretty good about yourself. You go back. Now you start tinkering. So now you're graduating from a following instructions to like, maybe I'll experiment a little bit. I'll put a few blocks over here. I'll put thrusters over here, thrusters over here. Maybe it's modeled after my favorite spaceship from whatever movie. Maybe it's Star Wars, or whatever it is, right? Hopefully by that point you're like, let's play with somebody else, and you do a matchmake, and you hop into the 1v1 mode, what we call the dual arena, and you hop in there. Now you get now you're up against somebody who maybe have spent a couple of days building, maybe a couple of weeks already, and they've kind of honed their design into something that's pretty, you know, pretty competitive, I would say. And so, you learn, you see that guy, you see that ship, you see how you lose, of course, because it's your first match. And you kind of go, what did I learn from that? Oh my God, balance. That ship had a sensor on the right side, but then he put the missiles on the left side, so I couldn't, maybe it's behind shields, so I couldn't take it out. So now you go back, and now you graduate, and you're a tinkerer. Now you're thinking. You're not just building something because it looks good. You're not just building something because somebody told you to build it that way. Now you go, okay, wait. So they put a shield on this side, and then they put the rocket launcher on the other side, but also behind some heavy shields. But it was still pretty well balanced. How did they do that? So now you're a thinker, you're a creator, you're a tinkerer. Now you're thinking about how they did it, and you try to match it. And of course, we do have some assists that tells you if your ship is balanced or not. So hopefully you get in a little bit deeper. It's a pretty deep game, right, Bo? It's not a game that you just kind of pick up and make some sandwiches, or catch some rabbits, or whatever it is. It's meant to draw you in. And if you use the Lego concepts, at some point you hopefully graduate to a master builder, and you just have a good feel for what parts work, what parts don't work. And now you're going in, and maybe this is your 10th session. Now you're the person on the other side that knows how to build, and you're facing off against noobs, and you feel that pride. You're top of the leaderboards. You're kicking ass. It's everything is really great. So because the build lab's actually multiplayer, you can actually invite other people so they can teach them how to build. And I think that would be the highest level. I think when if we see players reaching the master builder level, I think we would have done our job. I hope that, just like any game, there's going to be run-of-the-mill players, the run-of-the-mill creators. I think there's always going to be people who have mastered not just the action of this game, because it is action packed, but I think mastering the building of it requires a certain level of mastery. It's great because we're already seeing some players come in, and on Discord, anybody watching this, if you do come join us, get the game, jump to the Discord. It's great to see already some of these kind of master builders kind of sharing tips already, and that's really rewarding for us as game developers.
Have you
So
seen
that's
any?
not. I don't think I answered the first 15 minutes. I think that's the first 10 days.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
explaining the game loop, I think, is important to help people understand what it's about. Have you seen any like crazy ship builds that you can explain or share with us? What's the
Well,
craziest thing you've seen people do?
the space toilet. Uh, it's always a surprise to go up against that player that has built the space toilet. It looks like a giant flying toilet,
Toilets.
but it flies pretty well, and it's really hard to take down. But of course, you're flying against it, and half the time you're laughing. And
Yeah.
but then there's I think I heard that there's a group of them now. They're like building a whole set of furniture. So there's like a chair and a table flying against each other, and the legs are pretty flimsy because it's just a bunch of blocks stacked together. I haven't fought against the flying furniture yet, but I heard they're pretty funny.
They're out there.
We just released a couple of new parts. That's pretty cool. You should check it out. I think we have it on our Instagram. One is called Shade 9001, which is a shield that looks like an umbrella, literally,
Okay.
and it's a cone shaped shield, and it's called Shade 9001, and there's great uses for it. And then we also have another part that's a really unique weapon called Ion Curtain, ION, and it sprays photons, not just one at a time, but just a spray of them. So it's really hard to get through that if you use it. So we're going to keep on releasing new parts for our players to get creative with.
And it sounds like the game is really only limited by your own imagination. You just keep tinkering, keep changing things a little bit at a time and seeing what you can come up with and testing it out.
It turns out, well, I'll tell you a funny story. Almost
Yeah.
everybody, the first few ships is Star Wars ships, right?
Really?
So it's either the X-Wing or the TIE Fighter,
Uh-huh.
And guess what? It turns out the people who built the TIE Fighter, they realize it's the worst design for a spaceship ever. Like, think about this, okay? It's great to look at, but then when you're in it, you can't
see.
No, it's actually terrible as a spaceship design. So like we've heard from many players like, oh, I built a TIE Fighter. And it's like, oh, I hate the TIE Fighter.
You can only see what's in front of you, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're in the like blinders, right?
Tunnel vision, yeah. Oh man, that's funny. What about like struggles building this game? With the building of anything, inherently there's going to be things that come along that are just a struggle, obstacles that have to be overcome. What were some of those things for BuildPort Xumia, and how did you overcome those things?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but the idea of building any ship that's using physics to fly, and then on the flip side, making sure that people don't throw up when they pilot a ship that's poorly or unbalanced. That is the most difficult challenge that we had to go up against, and we weren't willing to sacrifice the creativity, and we weren't willing to sacrifice the feeling of a different ship flying different, right? Like, I don't want to make it so that you can build any ship visually, and then when you fly it, it just flies the same, right? That would be a fail because it doesn't make any difference. That is just decorations. On the other hand, if we don't allow you to build any ship, let's say we limit you, oh, you have to have maximum 4 thrusters, and they have to be 2 on one side and 2 on the other, then it's not true creativity. Then it's just following somebody's template. So we weren't willing to give up the creativity, and we want to make sure that it still feels different or pilots differently. So the solution was, I think I touched on it earlier. Is this kind of like imagine having R2D2 on your ship and just like not taking over the joystick, but like just make sure everything is kind of uh, balanced and doesn't go crazy. So it's kind of like so we have this AI system that balances all your thrusters no matter where they are. You could put one like way out there and then eight on this side. This invisible AI tries to balance everything so that it doesn't get out of control, but it still is meaningful where you put things. So I think that was the most difficult thing, and we're constantly tweaking. Like in the last 3 months since our kind of beta launch, I think we've pushed out like 3 or 4 updates already, and we're still fine tuning the physics and that whole system. Um, but yeah, it's a really really hard thing, and that's kind of why I think we could have taken the easy route and like made a game for I don't know flipping hamburgers, and that would be super easy, I guess. Or like frisbee golf, that would be easy to do. And but we definitely picked one of the hardest problems in VR over the network, full creativity, and making sure it's flyable. So when I fly against you, it's not just a ship that's synchronized across the network. Every part is synchronized. So when I shoot off your right wing, when it
Hmm.
goes off, that's synchronized across the network. Everything is synchronized across the network. So we definitely chose the hardest problem to solve for this game.
Mm. When I was playing it, I kept thinking about one of my favorite games growing up was, or series, I guess, was the Rogue Squadron series, the Star Wars Rogue Squadron series from 64
LucasArts,
to the
LucasArts.
GameCube. Yeah. I think you could like go into sort of a first person mode in the cockpit, maybe. I can't remember for sure, but typically you'd be like a third person camera view of the ship
Yeah, yeah,
in that game. And I just thought, man, this is so neat that you shrink down and like teleport sort of into the cockpit of the ship that you just built, and then you are piloting the ship, and
yeah.
whether it's against the opponent online or in the single player mode. Maybe tell us a little bit about the single player mode too, because I think it's great when games have both. Like, because people's personalities are just different. Some people want to play online against others. Some people are more introverted or whatever and just want to play by themselves. And then also, it's good to have a single player mode. I think for practice, to practice the game for when you want to play online later. So I appreciate the inclusion of both of those things. Tell us about the single player mode a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't launch with it, but we always knew that they needed it, especially in VR because, it's sometimes hard to find a match. But more importantly, I think, we always had this in our mind that the game needs to be fun for single player as well. It's called Core Siege. And
Yeah,
it's kind of concept is kind of like, well, this goes way back, but games like Galaxian and Galaga, and there's actually a game in the arcades in the '80s called Star Castle
Star
or
Castle.
Power
I don't think I've
Star
heard of
Castle.
that one.
Yeah, there's a
I'm gonna have to look that up.
look it up. Yeah, there's a core with these kind of shields around it, and then you trying to like bust through the shields while being attacked by other enemies. And then
Okay.
if you manage to bust through all the shields, these rotating shields, and if the core deals, if you take out the core, then you finish the wave, and then you do the next one. So, in many ways, like maybe it's I think it was intentional, but it was modeled after some of these old school arcade games.
Kind of
And
has a little bit of a little bit of tower defense in there too,
yep,
which I
yeah, a
thought was
little bit,
cool.
yeah. And you can, the way. Well, let me back up a little bit. Maybe how do you play this? Well, when you start Core Siege, the goal is to protect the power core,
Yeah.
and the power core generates energy that you can use to use bigger ships, more complicated ships, or also use more complicated defenses. So you're in this arena, and there's like 4 or 5 platforms that you can place defenses, and there's one platform that you can. Uh, there's a platform where you can spawn your ships,
Hmm.
wave after wave of enemies come through these portal gates, and you have to fight them off, make sure that they don't destroy your port. But of course, the waves are when the waves are over. There's boss attacks, and the boss gets harder and harder, and you just have to survive it all, right? So along the way, it's not just pure action. The choice of ships that you use, that these are ships that you designed yourself. How do they fly? Are they fast enough? Are they strong enough? It's really meant to be replayable. So let's say you got to the fifth wave, just like what I talked about before. Hopefully, you learn from how you can do better, not just how you pilot, but maybe you can design the ship a little bit better. Go back to the lab, tinker a little bit, come back with something that's maybe a little bit faster, a little bit more nimble, and try that. So that replayability is not just you trying to get up, to survive uh, longer and to get on the leaderboard. The replayability has to do with being smart about what kind of ships you build and to bring into core siege. And that's where the replayability comes in. The bosses and everything are actually all built from using the part system. So, another thing that's kind of cool about it is that you can take a look at the boss ship that we designed and maybe learn from them as well. Hopefully, it's action packed and it's, again, it goes back to when I was a kid playing in arcades. Like it's cool to be standing in arcade like Stranger Things and using joysticks and watching the vector graphics, but I think all of us imagine ourselves in those
In it.
ships, right? I think subconsciously you did,
Yeah.
and you couldn't do this without VR. Like really, that feeling. Like that's why Bo, you and I both love VR gaming. It's
Yeah.
really hard to convey in a video until
It's
you
so
do it.
difficult. I think that's why the adoption has been so slow, is because it's so hard to demonstrate it in promotional material on flat screens. It's
Yeah,
almost impossible until you've tried it out for yourself. You really don't understand. And even then, you know, if your first experience doesn't go well because you picked the wrong game or something, it might sour you on it. And
yeah,
there's so many great things out there to play, and I think that what you've built is one of those things.
yeah.
Um, and there is, like you said, so much potential to expand it in even more ways, which I think is really exciting for you and your team, and then for us as consumers, to be able to continue to expand upon what you've already, the foundation you've already laid for this thing.
We like to think it's we're making these games for like your kids,
Mm,
and I think at some point there will be a generation that grew up with VR native
yeah.
and then trying to play on a screen, on a flat screen, won't feel great because it's not them.
Mm,
But
yeah.
in VR, it is them going through these experiences and, surviving and building and winning and beating, all those things that make them feel great. It's them doing it, not them as in the third person controlling another character, right? And that's the one thing that's really, I think it's going to take a while for game industry or the consumers to realize that that's one of the fundamental differences is console games, flat screen games. You think about how many games is third person, right?
Hmm.
Last
Yeah.
of Us, whatever. You're playing a character that's moving through the world. It is like a movie, but you're interactive. That doesn't work in VR because you are that character, and I can't make you do things that you don't want to do, right? It changes everything. It changes how you design games, the genre of games, and I think
Hmm.
that's partially the adoption. Like anybody growing up with console games and whatever, they're already set in their ways. They kind of their minds, their brains loves gaming that way, which is nothing wrong with that. But I think it's a generational thing. I think your kids, or maybe I don't know how old they are, but you know, what we're seeing is about like 10 to 14-year-olds, the Gen Alphas, I guess they're called. You know, once they try it, it's them, and it's not just a game. It's like social. They're yelling at other kids.
Yeah.
They're doing stuff. They're doing, they're dancing while they're playing. They're screaming. It's kind of like a playground. It should be like a playground, a safe place, hopefully. But that's really where the possibilities are, right? So I think it's a generational thing. That's why it's taking so long.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, like my parents don't really play games, but they also didn't grow up. They didn't grow up with that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and they kind of sort of got into it, with like the Wii Sports movement back in the day, but it never like they never became serious gamers. I did grow up with it as a kid, and I still love it to this day. And I am sure that my kids, like you said, the more that they're exposed to this, whatever you grow up with, I think this is true of any generation. Whatever you grow up with, you kind of think you kind of continue to do those
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a really amazing experience. I grew up with CD-ROM games as well. Miss,
Yeah,
I don't know, a game called Miss.
missed. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so obviously I played the heck out of Miss and Riven and all those games. I love those
yeah,
games. And then they released the VR version like a couple years ago.
uh-huh. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I can't believe how like I had shivers. Even though I was never in that world, my brain convinced me that I'd been there
yeah,
in a way that I've never experienced. Like everything just came rushing back to me. The
yeah,
moment you land on the island, the sunken ship, and that the ladder down from the big tree and to the underground lab, and
hmm
everything just came rushing back to me, but in a way that should not be possible because
that
I've
you were
never.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, but in VR, oh my god, it was a really amazing experience.
yeah, yeah. I know. I've played some of it in VR, and I thought, man, this is so crazy. But we were like, we weren't. My family wasn't poor, but we didn't have like a ton of expendable income, like extra, for stuff like that. So I never had missed. We didn't even have a computer in our home until I was probably 15. Um, and but I remember going to um, Kmart here in the States
Oh,
back
we
in
had
the
Kmart up here too.
okay, yeah, and almost every time I'd go down they had an aisle dedicated to like PC hardware. There were games there, of course, as well. And I remember picking up that mist box so many times and looking at the little thumbnails on the back and thinking, this
Yeah,
looks so real. It looks so cool. And wishing I could play it. So, yeah, I played some of it in VR when it came out.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great game. It's a great world.
That's awesome. So, for any young creatives out there who might be listening, Wilson, what advice? You've been doing this for a while. You've had a great career. You've worked in a lot of different mediums. What advice would you have for them?
First of all, I want to say it's a seemingly difficult time for creatives and artists
Yeah.
because of AI. I would like to say that I have faith that um, what humans can create is always going to be surprising and hopefully delight the audience that's always looking for something new. So I would say, first of all, to the creatives and artists out there, don't give up. Don't let the tools use you. Use the tools. And
Mm,
there's a way to do that, right? Like, there's a lot of great tools for in betweening. Let's say you're in animation. You can still create something that's uniquely yours, uniquely human, draw the keyframes. But there are tools for in betweening the keyframes so that you no longer have to have a full studio behind you. So that applies to game development, that applies to animation, that applies to computer graphics, visual effects, VFX. I think what we might see is hopefully a whole generation of creatives and artists learning to use these tools. Don't let the tools use you. Use the tools. Make that thing that maybe nobody else really believes in, and only you believe in, or maybe you and a few friends. Know that now, unlike any point in history, you don't need $1 million or $2 million or 40 people to make that thing. You'll need the idea and the dedication for 6 months, 3 months, and then these tools can make it look awesome and make whether it's game development or animation or whatever else. So I think that's the one key piece of timely advice for I think young creatives and artists out there. And then I think looking at my career, um, be impatient and stick with the right people. So that never gets really talked about because I think when they hear, artists gets interviewed or directors or whatever, it's always about that person. But let me tell you, I think if I go back to my career across 3 or 4 different industries, there's a few key people that I admired, I went after, I learned from them, and I tried something new, but kept them connecting with them, kept on learning from them. They opened new doors for me. I opened new doors for them. So what people don't realize is that at the very highest level of creativity, and whether it's games or movies, it's really a group of people that knows each other. And all you hear is about Pixar and ILM. What you don't know about, and you hear about George, you don't hear about the 500 people that's been there for 30 years that you can pick up a phone and go, hey, I've got this crazy project. You got 3 months or 2 months? Let's do it. Or hey, I'm starting something new. Can you do this for me with me? Sure, why not? And those people are the best of the best. They come along for the ride every time, and so really learn to recognize um, other people that's passionate and talented that you can work with and hold on to them like for dear life. That's really really important. It's really about people. So again, I think that's also why I'm not too worried about AI taking over all creative jobs. It's because if you're talking to AI, you yourself don't have that partner to bounce ideas off, really. I mean, you do in some ways, but what I mean is like they're not going to be have their own emotions and own story and their own hangups. And when you're creating something like like BuildPort Xumia, I don't think it would be BuildPort Xumia without my team questioning, should we do this? Here's an idea. How about this? Hey, I drew this. Let's do that. And that comes from everybody. And I mentioned Pedro. I brought Pedro over from the mobile game company I started with, as well as like a handful of other folks I've known for a long time. So teamwork, building that family that you can work with across maybe the industry you start with is games, but then just stick with the same team, and they'll that's the true power of the type of work that I do. It's really about teamwork.
So be patient and stick with the right people.
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's what
like
it comes down to. Yeah,
it. Yeah.
I talk about building teams like building an engine. You have to find every part that fits perfectly,
Yeah.
but you don't need a huge complicated engine. It's really the right parts coming together, and once you have it, you can build anything. And that's
Yeah.
another thing that people don't realize. Like, oh, I need to raise $20 million and get a team of 30 people. No, not true. Definitely not today's age. You need like 3 people. You need to recognize what you can do, what you're missing, find those other 1 or 2 people that's passionate about this idea or that idea, and just go. That's the engine, right? If you build it right, you can do anything. And you should, maybe the first one fails. Try the next one, try another one, right? Everybody
Sure.
has to make a living, but it's not about, raising a lot of money, building a big team. That, believe it or not, is a trap that a lot of people fall into as well. That's my advice. Hopefully that helps.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I think it's great advice.
It's worked
I
out
think
okay
that
for me.
too many of us, you know, we fail once and we're like, well, I guess I'm just not good at this. I'm not cut out for this, and we quit, and we move on. And that patience component and surrounding yourself with the right people who can walk you through those times and be with you, walk through that with you. I think that's so important. Community is so important.
Yeah, yes, it is.
And in a world where we seem to be more connected than ever, but also further apart than we've ever been,
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah, totally.
At the
Totally.
same time, I think that just a reinvigoration of the idea and the need, the health that comes along with a solid community around you is just so important, so
Yeah.
important.
I mean, I don't think it was conscious, but if you actually think about it, that's kind of what the game's about too, right?
Yeah,
Building a community of other builders and to play with and learn from and build
sure.
some more awesome stuff. And then hopefully in time there'll be new challenges and new game modes, and they'll
Yeah,
kind of so. Yeah, I mean, I think as a studio, our values, our philosophy around life, my philosophy around life is all thrown into this one little game. And that's kind of why I think, I don't know, when we talked online, I was telling you this is like the most important project of my career. And it
Mm.
sounds kind of wild because, like, yeah, you work from this and this and that. But I swear to you, I think this is the most important, or at least it's closest to my heart.
Yeah, well, I can't let you go, Wilson, until you tell us one more story that I think kind of goes along with what you've been saying. You had this opportunity um, a few years ago and it ended up with you meeting the Pope. Can you just tell us that story real quick?
It sounds like a beginning of a joke, but it's not. I walked in a bar and there was the Pope. No, well, one thing led to another. We were doing some, you know, VR and AR stuff for museums and education about 7 years ago. And
Mhm.
one thing led to another, and I got invited to potentially do a project with the Vatican. So I flew over there not just to meet the Vatican Museum, but they invited me to be a juror and a mentor to be at the first Vatican sponsored hackathon, which is amazing. I got to work with 200 bright young people right in the heart of the Vatican. And over the course of like 48 hours, we hacked together, they hacked together 20 awesome apps that were trying to solve one of five problems that was challenged by the Pope Francis. So, on the last day, I didn't expect anything, but I got, the proverbial golden ticket, follow me. And it's like, where are we going? Just follow me. So it's like, you're going through the maze of the Vatican. I don't know if you've seen when a Da Vinci Code, you know, there's
Yeah,
all these like, it's not that bad. It's not like secret passageways or anything, but it is very convoluted, it's a whole city,
yeah,
inside the
uh-huh.
walls behind St. Peter's. So you kind of follow them through these hallways and alleys, and then suddenly come with me. And like, there's a space somewhere in there. There's like 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and we are right at the front with my friend Ryan Thomas, who's kind of like I call him the Jason Bourne of the Vatican. Like he's a brilliant guy, entrepreneur, and he does these special projects related to the Vatican. And like Ryan leads me to the front. And so I'm standing there, and behind me, it's like a football stadium. People, who knows how long they've been waiting. So I'm right in front of that amazing sculpture. And Pope Francis comes, and, one by one, I see them from, going from the right side to the left side. I'm in the middle, actually. So, he's coming over. And finally, he's with me, and I've got my hoodie on. I've got a VR headset on my arm for him to bless. Because I don't know, why wouldn't you do that, right? And he comes over, shakes my hands, and leans in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. He said to me, translated to me, he said, keep humanity at the heart of your technology, which
Mm,
this was 7 years ago, before the rise of AI, before really VR and everything was a big thing. And that really, like that 14-second, that phrase just stuck in my brain.
mm,
And I'm pretty sure it has influenced everything we've done as a studio, YumeBau Inc. Everything we've done, I think, in this game, trying to be a good game, trying to be, celebrating human creativity, right? And he said this, and that stuck with me. And it became the motto for our studio. Our studio
mm,
is, made for humans, made by humans. And we really might, not that we don't use AI as a tool. We use it. We don't let it use us.
mhm.
But that phrase has definitely stuck with me, and it's I have no doubt that it's going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
So you meet the Pope, and the one thing that he leans forward and says to you is, "Keep humanity at the heart of your technology."
Yeah, like no
That's
context. I don't know if maybe somebody told him like I was doing like a VR company doing
mhm.
education. I'm not sure if there's any context, but he just said the perfect thing to me
Yeah,
that just will stay with me forever, I think.
that's so cool, and I think that's great advice and a great last story to end on for our time here today, but tell us where we can find BuildPort Xumia
Yep.
so that we can.
Super easy.
I'll have links in the description below, actually, but go ahead and tell us where you're available.
Yeah, just go right to the MetaQuest store, type in Xumia, Xumia. It should pop up. If not, then you could do BuildPort, one word.
Yeah.
Xumia, Xumia. It should pop up. Find us on TikTok, on Instagram, BuildPort Xumia, all one word. But also come join us on Discord. Find us on Discord, and our community manager Katya will love to have you there.
Well, this has been a great episode, Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Save State. Everybody, go check out BuildPort Xumia. Stay kind and encouraging out there, and we'll catch you on the flippity flip.